Welcome to Energy Thinks, a podcast about leading in the energy future. I'm Tisha Schuler, your host and the CEO of Adamantine Energy. This season 9, is paired with the release of my new book, The Myth and the Moment, From Polarization to Progress in the New Energy Landscape. It's here. You can order it on Amazon, and I'll have a link for you in the show notes. I have just such a fun, delightful conversation for you today with an inspiring colleague. He's inspired a lot of my thinking. I'd like to think I inspired a lot of his thinking. You be the judge of that. It's Kevin Krausert. He's the CEO and co-founder at Avatar Innovations. I met Kevin actually when he was the CEO of a service company. And so I've gotten to be adjacent to watching his career development. And now he has one of the most interesting organizations at the intersection of venture capital, innovation, traditional oil and gas companies, and of course, our energy future, including our industry's leaders. So I love, and in full disclosure, I'm an advisor to Avatar because I really believe in what they're doing. You can learn more about Kevin in our show notes. If you'd like to stay connected with what I'm up to, I hope you will go to energythinks.com or Substack and subscribe to my weekly newsletter. Both of these things are true. Kind of near the end, there's a funny story of, I didn't mention that Kevin was associated with this story in the book, but it involved a very awkward dinner and some cigarettes. So if you'd like to hear that, I hope you'll hang on till near the end. And I hope you now enjoy my conversation with Kevin Krausert. Kevin Krausert, welcome back to the Energy Thinks podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to see you, Tisha.
Well, I'd love to get your take on my new book, The Myth and the Moment. As one of my trusted friends, colleagues, and advisors, I gave you an early copy. I'd love to hear what your reaction to the book is, and what's one idea that you would underline for our industry that, like me, you spend a lot of time engaging with all parts of our industry.
Yeah, I think you've really nailed, no pun intended, the moment that I think the industry is in. You know, one line you use in it that I've almost, copied from you is, how the myth of an easy energy transition has unraveled. And what I add to that in the speeches I give is, how, we've moved from the euphoria of the pandemic around green investments, and we've woken up with a 5-year hangover. And that real euphoria that was there was predicated on, you think about where we were at. We were all locked in our house for months or years, depending upon where you were at, and stopped traveling. And we actually did see a dent in oil demand. But you think about actually what it took to get to that dent of oil demand, and it literally involved us leaving our houses. And investors somehow convinced themselves that, first of all, that was going to be a trend that held. And secondarily, we were going to be able to flood in a bunch of Silicon Valley style venture capital into the energy system, and we were going to be able to scale these technologies like Uber. And 5 years later, we've woken up and realized that the Silicon Valley obsession with disruption is not going to work in energy. You can't disrupt your way to a new energy future. You can only build it. And energy doesn't scale like an app. It scales with steel, with labor, with time. And so the thinking now is, what replaces it with the moment that we're in? And I think that there's a lot of people trying to articulate it, but the way I see it is really a threefold moment that we're in. First of all, it's going to be cost, performance, and safety. In this new era where everyone has realized there's not an endless public appetite to pay for more expensive energy technologies, how does the oil and gas industry deliver that laser focus on cost and capital discipline? Secondarily, inside of that, AI is reshaping what performance means for all of these organizations. And how do we think about integrating artificial intelligence in our operations to empower humans with smarter systems, with predictive operations, And most importantly, how do we train people to ask the right questions with artificial intelligence and use technology to augment people instead of just replacing them? And I really see some incredible leadership out there in the industry on this. And I'm just going to call out one in particular, Phillips 66, who's just done an incredible job really modeling out what the energy leader of the future looks like, and how do we empower our employees to deliver this cost, performance, and safety mindset. The second piece the industry needs for a vision at this moment is really what I'm going to call energy abundance. We're looking at an interesting time in energy production where at $60 oil bans, where does this new technology come from to unlock new production to make sure we're delivering the cost, performance, and safety that the world is calling us to deliver? And the traditional R&D engines, the service sector used to be where the innovation came from. Where's this next wave of innovation going to come from, and how are we actually going to increase production at price bands that are looking a little bit differently? And then thirdly and finally is, I think, inside of this mindset of what the new vision looks like, we can't forget about emissions. We finally have some breathing room as an industry. We need to look at what worked and what didn't. Methane reductions worked fantastically. Hydrogen didn't. The venture capital models that pushed $50 million pilots, thinking we were going to scale these into $500 million first-of-kind projects, that didn't work. The next phase is really going to have to align technology and innovation with new financing models that actually fits the energy scale and risk profile investors are calling us. And I think taken together, that's the moment and the vision that the oil and gas industry needs to deliver to the world at this time, and that's cost, performance, and safety. It's energy abundance to make sure we all have enough of it in secure supplies, and it's realizing we still have to do our part on emissions, but the way we had been going about it as an industry these past few years is maybe has some room for improvement.
So I'm not surprised, Kevin, that I wrote a whole book and then you built on it and made a coherent theory of the future to go forward, which is exactly why I wanted to talk to you. I also want to just flag in many ways the this time arc that you talked about starting at COVID, right? 5 years ago. The last travel event I went to was in Calgary with you. And so it's funny, in that time period, you have started Avatar Innovations. You've continued to engage in this kind of innovative, visionary industry leadership where you are both of the industry, but apart from the industry, a little bit like I like to work. So I want to dig into these ideas of this vision you have. But before we do that, let's just maybe table set for some of our audience if they aren't familiar with Avatar Innovations. I also just want to flag to remind me that the themes that you brought were very consistent with the industry leaders I've already talked to this season on the podcast. So Chad Zamarin, Toby Rice, Arjun Murti, this idea that cost, innovation, and emissions, like we're going to have to keep an eye on emissions while striving to deliver this global energy abundance. These are themes I think every company is wrestling with. So let me just give you a chance to tell us some headlines of who Avatar is, what you've been doing. You've been in it for 5 years. What are you up to right now?
Yeah, maybe. Thanks for the opportunity. I remember very well that panel where we met in a cold February night. I think 3 days before the pandemic really got locked down, and you got safely back to Denver. But we've grown quite a bit since then. In short, we call ourselves an energy technology venture studio. So there's 3 legs to the stool. The first leg is energy technology, entrepreneurship, leadership development opportunity for mid-career energy professionals, where they get listen to some incredible leaders on what the future of energy holds, and come up with a technology idea. The next leg of the stool is a technology development studio. We have partnerships in place with a bunch of post-secondary and private labs where they'll get a bit of pre-seed capital and can kind of go and build and prototype the best of those ideas. And then we have a venture capital fund that we can seed the very best of those ideas and bring them to market. And so I guess the headlines of what I think we've really accomplished, I think is first and foremost, you have to do technology development and leadership development at the same time. There's lots of people out there that do leadership development, and there's lots of people out there that do technology development, but we're the only one that I know of that does both in the same forum. And the reason being, if you do technology development without leadership development, culture will eat technology for breakfast every day of the week. The guys will.
That's actually really important. And I know you have other headlines, but let's just dig into that for 1 second. Because you're bringing this innovation, Shark Tank, venture capital mindset into oil and gas companies and people from oil and gas companies into this. So it's a very specific marriage of traditional industry and this sort of venture mindset. So what I hear you saying is, absence the leadership cultural component, employees are just going to sort of go back to whatever the culture is they know. And if that culture happens to not be fast moving, innovative, they're going to get stuck. Is that some of the idea?
Well, the oil and gas industry is a capital intensive, safety intensive industry, and so we have a lot of processes in place that exist for very good reason. Because when things go sideways in our industry, they go really sideways, and then we lose that responsibility piece that is so critical for us to be able to do it. So what we're trying to give is a forum to sort of operate in a new way outside of the structures that are designed for a very good reason inside the oil and gas industry, the nimbleness. So it gives the corporate the nimbleness of a startup, but then it gives the startup, should it work, the horsepower and the scale of a large corporate. And on that, kind of how you have to do leadership development and technology development as two sides of the same coin is also the fact that technology is now evolving faster than any of us can keep pace with. And gone are the days where you can take a degree and you're good for the rest of your career, minus a few professional hours. Future-minded leaders and companies in our industry need to commit themselves to regular check-ins to try the power of these new technologies in a safe sandbox that isn't a live drilling operation. And that's really, I think, one of the successes that we've had. And in this world of efficiencies and cost containment and asking employees to do more with less, increasing contingent and third-party workforces, we provide a forum to build those skills of meeting people you've never met before, rapid collaboration, and coming up with a new idea. And that's the exact skill set that's going to enable companies to do more in this future of energy, as well as empower their leaders so that they're, the super soldiers of the future of energy.
That's great. And you're crowdsourcing some of this innovative lab need work while also making sure that employees are psyched and motivated to stay in our industry. It's the place where cool stuff is happening. What other headlines did I interrupt you from getting to?
Well, maybe I'll just double click on some of the KPIs that I'm pretty proud of. From the 1,400 energy professionals across North America who have taken the Avatar program these last 4 years, 96% of them have reported an increased passion for working in the energy industry.
Amazing. That's actually worth like a triple click. I don't know what that does on our computers, but here, I mean, in a world where it is still hard to recruit into oil and gas, easier today than it was a year ago, but still hard. That's huge to have our best and brightest 96% feel more passion for working in this industry. So
Yeah.
Yay, Avatar.
Well, it's more yay the incredible people leading the future of our industry, and so 90% of them have reported increases in productivity. 40% of them get a promotion inside for their first year of completing the program. It's been pretty remarkable from what happens when you can empower people in new ways. The second, I guess, sort of big headline is I think that what started as an idea is we're now a global entity with operating hubs in Houston and Calgary. We've delivered in-person programming in Saudi Arabia, and we can now boast that we're an innovation partner for about 30% of global oil production. Which is a feat to be proud of if you add up the production of all of the partners that we have. I think we're still growing. The final headline is maybe, I think, really just around thinking about what a new capital stack that's going to be tailored to the future of energy. Our first fund with Cenovus as our largest investor has really allowed us to solve the financing gap that's left between venture capital, private equity, debt markets, and operator balance sheets, to really be thinking about what is the risk return profile that's going to make sense to get the needed technologies our industry requires to deliver that vision that the moment calls for us. Has been remarkable. We've developed, have had 70 technologies developed by 25 energy majors in our studios, and they're not moonshots. They're real operator-backed solutions, moving from lab to the field, and that's pretty exciting. And we're ready for what comes next. And I think 2026 is going to be a really exciting year for the future of energy, despite some of the chaos on the horizon.
Well, and I think, as an advisor to Avatar, I've gotten to see Avatar identified a need in the space, came into to meet to get into the Venn diagram where nobody else was. And a number of organizations have tried to do it. But I think Avatar's been uniquely successful because you continue to pivot and evolve to meet the needs of both the operators, the participants, and the startups that you're launching. But also, you're really moving quickly with the technology and politics that factor into all of this. And so I've been really impressed with just how relevant you've remained. I think it's hard in a Venn diagram where all the circles are all moving. Avatar continues to evolve to meet the need. So as a shameless, supporter of Avatar, I'd love to see more companies participate. Can you just give a 30-second, how do companies participate? Do they send their employees to join? Do they sponsor? What's the way that companies get involved? And I'll put your contact information in the show notes to make sure they can follow up.
Yeah, the most common way is identifying some of their high performing leaders who want to upskill their abilities in the industry and network and rapid collaborate. And so companies buy seats in the program, which the next program starts in February 2026. The second way is some companies just interested in the technology piece, and they can partner with us to develop the specific technologies that have come with us. And a new way is increasingly companies are looking at dormant IP that exists inside some of their R&D functions and thinking there could be new applications for it and sharing it. And if you're just an individual, just go to our website, avatarinnovations.energy, and apply. If your employer already is a sponsor, it'll be free of charge, and your application will be assessed in partnership with our partners. And if it's not, we have a number of scholarships that are available for a variety of people. But easiest way is just go to our website, avatarinnovations.energy, and pitch in. This includes everyone, and we don't want to make barriers for anyone.
Yeah, it's great. I've gotten to participate in a lot of the programming, and it's extraordinary. It's split between Calgary and Houston. There's participants from companies that are also in neither of those locations. It's pretty cool. So 2026, the new program starts. When are you going to open up your applications, Kevin?
Great news. They actually opened up this week. So you can go
Awesome. That means by
online
the time you're
and
listening to this audience, they are open. We'll put a link in the show notes. Awesome. Well, let's keep going to back to some of your ideas about the vision for the future, like what comes, after the moment. As you mentioned, it's pretty clear that the myth of an easy energy transition is unraveling. The politics, however, have just gotten more polarized, particularly here in the US, around energy and climate. And that does make it hard for companies to operate in a way that is responsive to today's politics, but also enduring for whatever comes next in this political environment. So I'm curious how you think about, you mentioned the importance as your third important aspect of the moment is emissions. But what do you think about actually the decarbonizing, the reducing the carbon intensity of the oil and gas industry? When you're working with companies, when you're working with tech, is it important right now, or is it really secondary? Like, where does that fit in to identifying the technology stack that's going to deliver on what the energy system requires?
Yeah, I think that there is a unique opportunity in this breathing room that the industry has gotten around emissions. But in order to build, I think, a durable vision for what the future of our industry can be, it's going to be emissions, it's going to be security, and it's going to be affordability. And on the emissions sort of pillar of that, I think that there's been, I think, threads of how energy innovation has been done. We went from, sort of the ivory tower R&D labs, thinking where we were doing a lot of deep tech in-house, and in the shale revolution, a lot of that, innovation function got outsourced to the service companies, who really brought a lot of the advances around long-reach horizontal drilling and multi-stage fracking and 3D seismic, that really unlocked this kind of new wave. Then we hit the pandemic, and we somehow convinced ourselves that it was going to be the Silicon Valley model of venture capital that was going to bring this next wave of innovation. And what we did is we seeded these companies that were sort of the lab scale to get to a pilot scale with sort of $10 to $50 million. And then they'd get there, and then everyone realized, well, the next step is a $500 million first of kind projects. The operators don't have the appetite to build that. The capital stack isn't available for those types of things. And so some of those startups are in a tricky spot right now. And what the industry really should be doing and thinking about is what are new ways for us to be focusing on how to change the cost curve of some of these emissions. One of the economists that I reference very frequently is Rob West from Thunderset Energy, and he really uses a $40 a ton benchmark for carbon that doesn't have economic impacts, doesn't invite political backlash, as sort of a holy grail. Now you look at the cost of abatement on direct air capture, which is multiples larger than that. You look at some of the hydrogen stuff, even some of the biofuel stuff. There are technologies that are on the horizon that really have an opportunity to get to that threshold. And if we're in a world where we can't bank on government subsidies or generous handouts, how do we pause at this moment and take some of these best technologies, of whether they're metal organic frameworks or covalent organic bonds, and really start thinking about what that efficiency driver is going to be inside of the industry, and what's going to be the role of physical AI. When you go to build your first of kind project, the reason you always have cost overruns is because you've got 1,200 engineers who weren't talking to each other, and surprise, this pipe runs into that heat coupler and change order. And so what is going to be the role of physical AI in actually changing that? And I think it's going to start looking like a unique combination of, maybe before I get to that too, is also, I think what we've realized when you're looking at doing an innovation on a multi-billion-dollar energy facility, maybe 3 guys in a garage isn't the right vehicle.
That's actually what I was thinking when you were talking. That was the other piece that was broken about the Silicon Valley model, is that you don't actually want someone who's never built anything, a facility, a parking lot. You don't want them trying to build something at a $50 million scale, never mind $1 billion scale. So there is that marriage of innovation and experience with capital projects.
And that's what
important as well.
And that's what we're really trying to solve for at Avatar, is how do you take the nimbleness of that startup? How do you take the entrepreneurial hustle of the service companies? And how do you take the discipline and rigor of the large corporations into some new structure? And so it's going to look like, I think, a unique partnership with producers. It's going to involve a unique relationship with EPCs. And it's going to involve new commercialization structures and new capital stacks. For us to be able to get there, to take this moment and pause and say, okay, if we have to go build an absolutely entire new value chain like hydrogen, it's going to cost a fortune. How do we look at the technologies that have the best chance of getting to that $40 a ton threshold? And whether you pay for that through subsidies, taxation, or even just cost efficiencies on an income statement, that's the focus that we need to be thinking about. And that's, I think, how the industry delivers longevity and durability at this moment, when the world is calling for us to deliver energy abundance, security, safety, and not forget about emissions.
So what I really hear you saying is the way you are imagining Avatar's role with the industry right now is to carve out some space for innovation that's thinking about a future energy system that really requires a balance between the urgency of today, more energy, geopolitical security, cost sensitive, and is imagining where we're going so that is a decarbonizing or lower emissions future for the industry. That aligns with a lot of the feedback we got from other interviewees I've had this season, which is that the future is still a race for the best energy, and the best energy is by definition going to be increasingly lower environmental footprint, which includes lower emissions footprint. But it's like, so you can't forget about it, but it's not the top. It's not the top of the list right now. These other items around abundance, security, affordability are just more urgent societal priorities. Do you think that's fair?
Definitely. And put it simply, it's production up, emissions down. And you can divide that into 2 different ways of thinking about it. Where is the new production going to come from? Are we back in a world of exploration? Where is the new Guyana? Or is it smarter recovery technologies on mature shale plays? And where do the service companies play to that? Where do the in-house R&D functions play in that? Where do the startups play in it? And whether you're looking at the emission side of the equation or the production side of the equation, this is the unique moment the industry has to bring forward what that vision is of we are going to continue to deliver reliable, secure, and affordable energy in a lower cost environment. We need technology. And if we're going to play a long game and be a valued partner in what the world wants from us is a lower environmental footprint, whether that's emissions, whether that's water, whether that's land, we can think more broadly about it and recognize that we're at a unique moment to deliver a new investment structure and a new technology structure armed with the power of artificial intelligence to deliver it.
Well, let me get your brain on something I'm working on, and it's not easy and no one solved it, so you've been warned. So I've been thinking a lot about the problem solvers. So these are policymakers, they could be middle managers. These are people who work in an environment where the myth of an easy energy transition has dominated for probably close to 10 years. This could be a regulator at like a air quality division. It could be a manager at a tech company who has to build data centers that are supposed to be aligned with their net zero goals. So anyone who's kind of squeezed between the myth and some net zero commitments and the reality on the ground that we're discussing, and in many ways our industry is just starting to take for granted. So a big thing that people like you and I have to do, and then a lot of energy industry leaders have to do, is talk to these problem solvers in a way that acknowledges the pressures that they're under. So we can't just say like, the myth is unraveling, good luck with it. We really have to find new ways to talk about, what I call the 3 T's of energy realism, which is timeframes, trade-offs, and truth. Now, I don't think we're going to be able to talk about it in those terms, because if you think that the energy transition is still going to be easy and free, this is a really difficult conversation to have. So I'm curious, what are you seeing? There's a lot going on in Alberta around the role of the oil and gas industry, about the role of fossil fuels in general, particularly around geopolitics and geosecurity. How is this conversation evolving generally, but also for people that climate is still a really top motivating priority?
Yeah, it's the part of your book where you talk about, I think it's climate alarmist, climate hawk, and then climate technocrat, or
climate curious.
climate curious, is, the last podcast I did was actually with a climate investment group. And I was really trying to make the point that using this moment to think about smarter ways to achieve what we all want to be able to achieve, recognizing that, even the climate alarmists are, recognizing the reality on the ground, and they're all looking for solutions. And so just coming at it from a kind of solution-based approach of, okay, the technology wasn't ready for prime time. What do we need to do to advance the technology, and what are new capital availability structures that is going to be able to do it? Is really where I found an interesting space of conversation. While I'm in Houston right now and spending increasing amounts of my time in Texas, Canada, I think, actually provides a really unique global case study for where we're at. Being the world's 3rd largest oil exporter, and having gone through the past decade some pretty onerous climate policy driven by the net zero thinking that was out there. And with the new world that we're in, there's probably no one person that amalgamates this moment than Mark Carney, our new prime minister. He was really the high priest of the net zero finance movement, but now he's prime minister of the world's 3rd largest oil exporter. At a time when we've got the easiest and fastest way to turn around Canada's economy and productivity challenges is going to be through doubling down on oil and gas. And so the consensus that I see emerging, and I think this might be Mark Carney's only Nixon could go to China moment, in the sense that he has the credibility with the climate movement, is how do you increase production and get production down? And that's going to be moving from an absolute-based emissions world to an intensity-based emissions world, in the sense that economic activity and emissions have been an almost one-to-one correlation for the history of our species, really. How do we break that curve to start saying we're going to produce lower carbon intensity barrels and cubes, and that's going to be a driver, and that changes the investment game for oil and gas companies. And I know a number of the key American super majors are really looking at this really, really heavily. And I think that that's where you can start carving out this moment for the world is, do we keep beating our head against the same dead horse that is not delivering results, or do we pivot to start thinking about a carbon intensity world? And that opens up a lot of new space that you can have rational conversations that are more solution oriented.
Your story is really interesting and reminiscent of our own here in the U.S. So you have your high priest. We have ours, which was Gavin Newsom, governor of California, who recently just signed legislation to increase oil drilling in Kern County, California. And for this, the same reason, right? So in some ways you make a great point, which is perhaps the best messengers are these avatars who themselves had to face the reality of the moment. And all we can do is help tell their story. How do we understand their pressures? How do we understand their pivot? How do we understand what's important to them, which is still going to be carbon intensity. So you make a great point.
Yeah, well, my mom is American and has a beautiful place in California. So I love going to, because it is a stunningly beautiful state. And so I want to cheer on better energy policies in California, and I don't have the time to figure out what party anyone comes from. Let's stay solution focused, and you can have a much more productive conversation than otherwise.
So you do a lot of public speaking and writing, and in fact, you just mentioned being on a sort of climate-centric podcast. As you know, I counsel against this temptation to see the world in black and white terms, where the myth of the energy easy transition is an opportunity for the industry to say, I told you so. We told you that wasn't going to work. We told you it was going to be hard. Have you had to bite your tongue recently? How do you manage that?
Well, I did learn from my 16-year-old niece after she missed a homework deadline that her marks were not going to be where they were, and she did remind me that "I told you so" were the foremost hurtful words in the English language. So I don't think it matters whether you're speaking about energy. No one ever wants to hear that, and so. I reflected on the part of your book, which you were it's in your opener, where you're at a climate summit that you hosted dinner with one of the world's most notable climate leaders. And I invited you to broach a conversation about bridging worlds.
You can blame Kevin for my smoking of unfiltered cigarettes habit.
And I remember that dinner vividly, and the amount of courage you demonstrated by walking into that, just completely unrigid perception. Even the solar people at the table were like, "No, you're being out. Let's side with the oil people." The guy was just so outrageous. And so I just want to congratulate you for tackling that. But I guess it was I was speaking at an environmental conference, and the head of the IEA was the keynote, and afterwards I was on a panel, and it was the same extreme scenarios that IEA sort of normal presents, and I just started kind of asking some questions of what's the scalability of this supply chain, capital availability, and one of the audience members, and is a notable environmental activist, not quite the same stature as the one you had the dinner conversation with, but pretty high up there, and he just started yelling at me, and literally accusing me of killing his children. It was a really tense thing. And I just kind of stayed calm. And I was like, look, I'm not suggesting this isn't a problem. What I'm suggesting is the current solution set is not up to par. And by the end of it, the environmental organizers had to take the microphone away from him. And, while I certainly didn't convince him, like I don't think you convinced the gentleman at dinner, the rest of the audience is really, I think, was left with okay, well, how do we actually solve this? And slogans and conflict are not the space that's going to solve it. Having an honest
You make such a great point that when we're in these situations, the antagonist or protagonist, depending on your perspective, is not actually the target audience. Our target audience is all the people who actually want to make a better world. And a lot of times simply keeping one's cool, being calm, listening, not having all the answers, sometimes that's the most influential thing we can do in those situations.
And it takes practice.
It takes practice.
I suggest starting with your niece before you have a conversation with a notable climate activist. But
yeah. And an occasional unfiltered cigarette.
I think you deserved a pack after that.
Yeah. Paint a picture for our audience, Kevin, of a world where oil and gas companies are not perceived as villains, are perceived as creators of the energy system of the future. What would that require?
It's us delivering a compelling vision in this unique moment that affords us. And that is the three pillars I was speaking about before: cost, performance, and safety. We need to stay laser focused on delivering returns for our investors so we keep our cost of capital low and the cost of energy low. And that is going to involve upgrading and high skilling our employees and making them active and champions of the energy industry. The second piece is the energy abundance vision of we want all kinds of energy and we want it affordably. And how do we do that? How do we increase production and decrease emissions in a world where the way we've been doing technology in this space hasn't really worked out? And most importantly, it's being that shared partner in what we all want. And while the world has realized they don't have an endless appetite to pay for expensive technologies, 80% of them want to solve climate change so long as they don't have to put $1 into the pot. And so while that has become apparent, we can't forget that the world is still calling us to deliver on emissions. And so we've got some breathing room. Let's deliver it. And so taken together, a vision of affordability, abundance, and being a trusted partner, that is how we pivot from the debates of the past.
Well, I think you just answered this question, but I'm going to give you a chance to answer it in a different way if you so choose. It's the final question I ask all my guests. Kevin, what are you most optimistic about?
Lots. And I'd say what I'm most optimistic about is that's a tricky question. What I am most optimistic about is people's ability to overcome difference when they sit down face to face with people. And when I see the division and the rhetoric that is spewed in social media on so many issues, you actually just get people to work and put people face to face. They realize there is so much more that they have in common with each other than they have that is different. And I think in this world of artificial intelligence and increased segregation, that we're at a moment where our species can put down their phone, turn off the television set, and just go meet somebody. And when you go on with that mindset, you'll solve some of the big problems.
Well, Kevin, thank you for your vision. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your friendship. And I look forward to our next collaboration. And thank you for joining me on the Energy Things podcast.
Thanks for having me, and keep up the great work with the new book.
Thanks. That's our episode for today. Thanks so much to you, my listeners. I love having these conversations with people in and around the industry. I always learn and think and update my thinking in real time. As you all know, I'm working on the series around the problem solvers, and I'm thinking it's a really hard problem to solve. That's why they're the problem solvers. And so it's fun to get Kevin's brain on that as well. I'm so grateful to Kevin for joining me here. I hope if you are a little bit curious that you'll check out Avatar and encourage a couple people in your organization to get involved in the next cohort. It's very competitive, so get in there early, but it's just so cool and something I'm really proud to be a part of. If you like what you're hearing here, please take a moment and give Energy Thinks a 5-star rating. It helps others in the industry find us. If you'd like to know more about our work at Adamantine, go to energythinks.com. While you're there, I hope you will subscribe to my weekly newsletter. Both of these things are true. I'd like to thank my colleague, Kayla Chives, for making all things Energy Thinks possible. Until next time, I'm Tisha Schuler, wishing you and yours happiness, prosperity, and good health.